Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology with our regular In the Hot Seat on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. And we've got a slightly different one with a different focus this week because we normally have people who, running a business and those kind of things, or growing a business in the past. But this week we're actually talking to someone who's got a real specialization around cybersecurity, but also we're going to be talking about something new, a cyber range later on as well, and talking about SimSpace and their cyber range. So we've actually got Jesse to join us. How are you, Jesse?
Doing well. Thank you, Lee.
Okay, so we always start this right at the beginning. I've mentioned it before, and we kick off with, where were you born? What you did, your parents did for a living, the kind of upbringing you had, and what you did school wise, and what you enjoyed, and what you were good at. So tell us a little bit about that. Back in the day.
From the start, huh? Well, I was born in Santa Monica, California. I lived there in LA until I was about 7. And my dad, who was a jeweler, moved up to Eugene, Oregon for a job. And so during school, I, of course, was really into video games when I was a kid. So I had a Nintendo.
Like many children of today, especially.
So I really gravitated towards computers, and I think back in the 3rd grade, I learned typing, and so I was doing 30, 40 words per minute after about a year of typing in the 3rd grade, working on Apple IIs, and actually I had a heart in math, so they put me in this program where we used computers to do math and got funny little animations when you got a problem right. So that allowed me to excel at math in grade school. And I kept on, being very proficient with computers, all the way into the next in middle school.
Do you think it was like the gamification of that mathematics that helped then?
So very much so.
Like the game, yeah.
Yeah, and it was also a special pilot program where I was a special group of kids, and I think even the counselors back in the day, they let kids play computer games. I remember one a long time ago. It was called Montezuma's Revenge, and it was just it was like early Mario Brothers. Fun little game. But I watched my dad with the jewelry, and he was a great artist. And so I had always wanted to be an artist growing up. So that was kind of my vision. Was
any particular type of artist? Was it going to be painting, drawing, sculpting?
It was
what area?
It was kind of all over the place. I had a knack for doing whatever it was that came, whatever medium that was in front of me. I just loved to work it, but drawing was my specialty. So I think I was going into trying to be a fine artist, drawing and painting, that sort of thing. And in middle school, that's another thing that drew me into computers, was trying to do animations on the computer, and anything involving animation, and on into high school. That was why I was trying to hang out in the computer lab, was to use the Macs back in the day, because that computer lab at my school only had Macintoshes. And
they were the most for graphics work and things, weren't they, in the earlier days?
They were. And so I used HyperCard to make animations, and that was a laborious process.
Yeah.
But it taught me about databases and the things that HyperCard was used for. I think it turned into FileMaker Pro and evolved into other things. But there in the computer lab, they got two actual computers, 2 PCs. They were slick, brand new 486 PCs, and the computer teacher didn't know anything about them, and so it was left kind of to the students to play with them.
Teach the teacher.
And yeah, the teacher was a real Mac. He was favored the Macs and didn't like PCs, and so it was up to the students. And of course, always had problems. They were chock full of pirated software. You name it. It was on those PCs, and so I kind of gravitated towards those because there were some really cool programs. I think there was like an Autodesk Animator on there that I started to get really good at. And I didn't have a computer of my own, so I would hang out at my friend's house and use his, and I would write batch files on sheets of paper and take them to my friend's house to see if they worked. My uncle gave me a DOS for Dummies book, so that was where I started learning batch files.
I'm ex-mainframe, so I'm quite familiar with batch files because we ran interactive during the day with Kix, and at night, after hours, it swapped over to batch, and it ran batch during the night. So, in fact, some people ran batch all the time. That's all they did. Depending on the type of application it was. But that's how the world was years ago. Batch files were really big. But nowadays we're still doing some batch processing in the way we do things like backups, and things are run as batch files really in the background, aren't they?
Yeah, they call it scripting now. So I mean, there's all sorts of things that are, if you have a single threaded script, it's pretty much a batch file. May not use the same language, but I find that I can pick up any scripting language pretty quickly and just get it. And that reminds me.
Yeah, what were your early programming languages then? So you went back at school.
Basic, of course. Yeah. That was an easy one. Then my friend who introduced me to the local computer store, he gave me a Pascal book. So I learned Turbo Pascal like 7.
Because Pascal was designed as a teaching language, wasn't it? The idea was to help people learn to program and making it, a simple language that could actually move into other languages.
It was.
I did Coral and Fortran, if you remember those, machine code and assembler as well. We'd embed in it because I was in flight simulation, so you needed high performance, so it worked quite well. But I taught the engineers at the end, and we used to use Pascal as a teaching language to teach people about real-time programming for simulation. So it's a good universal starting point, isn't it? But nowadays it doesn't work because Pascal was a procedural language, and we don't do procedural programming anymore. It's all object orientated.
Yeah, and it led quickly. It was kind of easy to jump from that into C. Although I didn't do that back in the day. But I found Pascal, compared to other languages I've learned over time, it was the most strict. Like you needed to have the punctuation, I think you had to use a curly brace at the end of each line. And it was just very unforgiving if you did something wrong. But back in high school, now that you mentioned mainframes, I got an account on the VAX. And that was in the very early days of the internet. So me and my friends would go around to different FTP sites and download PC demos. If you remember those, they're still a thing, but PC demos, and we would play the different games or things that you could use Telnet to get to. So we would play MUDs all the time, and they were like
a lot of people won't remember MUDs, but they were predominantly text-based, weren't they? So you typed in "turn left" and it would say you walk into a corridor, so and so happens. So, but it was multi-user as well, so it was quite strange running on a mainframe, and this like world was appearing in front of you in words.
It was like a text-based World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
pretty
That's right.
much. Massive multiplayer mud.
Nowadays, you don't need any imagination. You can be there, can't you?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems to be with the
exactly.
virtual reality stuff that's available nowadays, you can be inside that world, not just looking at it from on a screen as well.
Right, but on the Vax, they had all the tools. They had all the things that we kind of take for granted now on the internet. They had email. They had, um, you could telnet places. You could do all sorts of things. Um, and as I kind of progressed and hung out at the computer store more and more, um, my friend's dad gave me an old televideo terminal, which was attached to a little 2400 baud modem, and I would connect to the Vax from home, and do all the things from home on the internet, the very early internet, the text-based version. And
So,
as
do you
I
remember Gophers then?
Gopher,
Gopher servers?
yep,
Or is that
Gopher
beyond the
servers.
yeah, so Gophers and you had then search engines that searched Gophers. So so you could actually get a
Yeah,
structure of multiple Gopher servers where they were. And it was an early day like menu driven internet, wasn't it? So you had to get
yeah.
onto the right server, and then you got into the menu and you could then go down through sub menus to find documents, to find
And then
programs
Lynx,
and
uh,
links.
the
Yeah, so
Lynx text-based web browser.
that's
That worked for a long time. I'm pretty sure that still works. It
yeah.
just like takes the very raw text parts of the HTML and displays it on the screen. Um,
So it sounds
yeah.
like you've got a really good understanding of computing. You were really driven by it, especially on the gaming side of things. So, what was the first job? Where did you go?
So that computer store that my friend introduced me to, I would hang out there every day after school, sometimes during school, which was a
Yeah.
no-no. Um, and eventually, I would I would configure their PCs to do things, and they'd be like, "Jesse, get out here, put it back to the way it was. I have a customer coming in," um, and so they would send me to get coffee, and so my first job really was getting the guys coffee, and then I hang out there so much that they put me to work. So I'd empty trash and I'd do things around the computer shop, and then eventually they hired me as a service technician. So I would fix people's computers. The funniest problem that I just felt terrible about charging people for was they would bring a computer back. They would bring a computer in and say it's super slow. What's going on? And bring it back into the service shop and boot it up and press the turbo button. And back then they had a turbo button, which if you pressed it to where the turbo button was off, it would slow the computer down to like 8 megahertz, which matched the original Intel 8088
Yeah,
speed. So that
changing the clock speed, wasn't it, on the processor?
exactly,
Yeah.
it changed the clock speed, so it would slow down enough to make it so applications programmed back in the day would still work. Um, and so that was the one that was like, oh man, I have to do this one for free because it's a no-brainer 5-minute fix.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of led into that shop that I worked at was a Lantastic shop. So that was
Okay.
one of the first kind of peer-to-peer networking systems out there, where every computer that ran Lantastic and had a network interface card could share files, could send email and things like that. And it was a bear to get all of the things running, and you had the config.sys and the autoexec batch file back then that ran during the startup, and you had to get all your drivers loaded and sorted nicely so that they were all happy and you had enough memory to run actual programs. And when you had the bells and whistles on the system, you had a sound card and all the the modem and the different drivers. So I became pretty good at because of my gaming history. I needed to get all those fancy things running to do the fun games. I had a knack for getting those things sorted and making them work.
And so a lot of people forget it wasn't that easy in the early days doing networking. Nowadays, yeah, it's so simple. You buy a physical router or a wireless router, and you connect your devices to it, and you're off and running. But we used to have to install software to get them to talk. We used to have to install hardware in them to get them to talk. Yeah, and wasn't that easy. And some of the technology that was around in the day, like I forgot the name of it, netware. So we
Oh
used to
yeah,
have
the Vel. That's
netware
what I was getting to. Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
from the
Yeah,
Vel to get like the machines in the workspace to be able to share files. So you'd have them all on the netware server, and you could share them. It's not like today, how simple it is today, is it?
the complexities are in different areas. It's like you don't have to worry about the memory management because Windows does that for you, or Mac does that for you. You do have to worry about the deeper aspects of where the technology's gone. Now it's cloud and things like that. So yeah, NetWare was the next step, and the whole shop was training to get their NetWare CNE certifications, and so I jumped in on that, and we all tested, and I think I was the person who scored the highest on the tests out of the whole shop, but I still failed the first test, and it was in the days of there was no internet quite yet in common use. So they had the whole knowledge base that you needed to use on this CD-ROM, and they had the wrong version anyway. We still went around installing NetWare everywhere, and then it moved on to Windows because Windows for Workgroups was coming out, and Windows 95, and at that point it was all built in. And
Well, I think it
kind of
was.
game
I think it was
shifted.
95 was the first one with a built-in stack, wasn't it?
Yep.
Prior to that, you used to have to install a third-party stack, and I think Microsoft had their own you could buy and install as well for the early ones. But I think Windows 95 was the one that came automatically with it, and then
Yeah.
then everything has a built-in IP stack, so you don't need to do any of it at
Right.
all.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, where to go from there? Just the evolution of computing since then. As far as that job, it really started to kind of peter out in '97 when I think it was Future Shop that came to town and pretty much sold all of the equipment that people wanted for the lowest prices,
Yeah.
and so really undercut the whole idea of having a computer store. Um, and so that place folded, and I became a private consultant. So I started my own business, and kind of had a crash course in small business right there, just to kind of have a job. That lasted for, I think it was a year or two before I realized I needed to do my taxes.
Yeah.
um,
There's a lot
and
more complications when you come to running your own
there really
business
is.
than just doing the actual work for people.
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that I think is better done with more forethought rather than, okay, you have your own business now,
Yeah,
swim.
yeah.
Um,
It
so
is
I went back.
in the deep end, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Some people can get it. Some people can do it. I didn't have I didn't have it the knack for it back then. Um,
So what came next then? You had your spell of consulting, and like I say, you
yeah,
had the challenges of the back office activity and things. So what came next?
I went back to work for a little small computer shop, and it was really a fly-by-night joint, and it was not a good experience. I gave that place a year, and I broke down. And even though Eugene, Oregon, is a very liberal town, and my parents, my dad was still a jeweler, and my mom had a Saturday market booth. So I failed to mention that. Ever since I was 7, we had a booth at the Saturday market that we would go to and set up every Saturday. And so I was always making these little creatures out of Fimo clay, which you could make all sorts of creatures. So I was a salesman at the booth selling my little things. Did a pretty good trade, but the Saturday market was kind of I'm not sure where I was going with that.
But it was your first, stage into selling, wasn't it? I would have
Yeah,
thought.
actually, it was my first stage of selling, but I guess I was going. My point was that I'm from a pretty liberal family, right?
Okay.
Growing up, I was always like, man, these corporations, and it kind of had a chip on my shoulder. And so when Symantec came to town and opened a building location in Eugene, at first I was like, oh man, these guys are, a big company, until finally I worked at that fly by night computer store and had a really bad experience there, and went to the only game in town, or so I thought, Symantec. Got a job there pretty quickly, and started supporting WinFax Pro. So I used all of my old modem knowledge to help people with their fax machines and their modems. And
That's another thing from the past, isn't it? How many people
yeah,
receive faxes these days?
yeah. I've heard of governments still requiring them as late as like 2018. So it's still a thing. Move quickly into supporting PC Anywhere, ACT, antivirus, all of the things for Symantec. I think within about a year and a half there.
Still around. It was really popular, ACT, wasn't it, as a CRM platform? But it was like on your own machine, so your single machine or multiple machines sharing a database. It was all local. I'm not sure.
It still might be around.
They went around the cloud group, did they, later, and similar to all the others that are available now.
Yeah. I think it's
You
got a lot of
competition nowadays. So that's all.
No, it was quite a thing though for a while. There were certifications for it and everything.
And you could get it to dial your phone for you. If you had the right interface and the right cables and that, you get it to dial your telephone numbers for you. So you could stick in 20 customers, and every time you finished a call, it would dial another call for you. It recorded time.
You have it robo-dial people
on the phone. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that it would do for you, which
was very cool. Yeah, actually, one note there is I got a job on the night train support, which was the night shift, and you'd be surprised. So some people back then wanted to fiddle with ACT all night long. So it's like, okay, I'm the only person in the phone queue. Great. Here, try this. All right. I'll send you a fax with the knowledge base document. That was the thing. So yeah, after about a year and a half at Symantec, I moved into their corporate support, and was supporting larger customers. And then I think, quickly moved into the platinum. So I was a technical account manager, and just had the big name accounts.
Was this more on the cybersecurity side by then, or
was
across the board?
I mean, cybersecurity really has its roots in antivirus, right?
Yeah.
So the evolution of antivirus products, back at my first computer job, I was the kid of the shop. So when there was a virus that came out, and one time we actually got infected, and the way you could get infected was you spread the virus with a disk. You had to actually have the floppy disk and run one of the infected programs, and it would infect the boot record on your hard drive. And the antivirus products of the day had virus definitions that came out with every version of the software. So like every year when they released a new version, you'd get the new definitions that would detect all the viruses. So one time I had to scan all of the floppy disks in the entire shop, all 1,400 of them. So with all of the different antivirus products, the Symantec, the McAfee, and then later on the virus definitions became a thing, and you could update them, and then the internet was out, and so you pull the latest virus definitions off the internet and roll them out.
Well, now I think they're updated, in every few minutes, sometimes in a day.
Yeah, every few minutes. Yeah.
As soon as a new thing has come out or a new threat insight's come out, it's been updated straight away, isn't it? So it's quite different to that once a year, a new set of virus definitions for that year.
Yeah, it is. And oftentimes they'll have a reputation lookup so that anything it doesn't recognize, it'll ping the internet and see, if this is a threat or not, or if other people have seen it and the prevalence and things like that. So, when you talk about cybersecurity, it really, I think it has its roots in viruses and the things that viruses have all classically done, because those are the techniques that hackers do initially, and then a virus may use that technique.
Because cybersecurity spreads a lot further than that. I think a lot of people seem to see antivirus as being the be all and end all, especially your home users and small business users. They think having antivirus and a personal firewall is all they need, but actually it's not. there's a lot more you need to be thinking about.
It's really like considering yourself a target, and what sort of defenses you might need being targeted by certain things. So antivirus is the same. As far as general defense, it's like having a fence around your yard. Is it going to block people from getting in your yard? Not necessarily. Or windows on your house. You close the windows so things don't get in. Things can still break in. People can still break in.
And even the best antivirus and the best personal firewall, again, it's just like having good locks on your doors. But if you open the door and let them in, which is like an analogy on someone clicking a link and downloading a file, which they do on a regular basis from a phishing attack, or they do a drive-by going to dubious sites. We won't focus on the subject of some of those, but get a lot of drive-bys. These kind of things, you're effectively inviting them in. It's about like last night. It was if the vampire turned up, he couldn't get in unless you said, "Would you like to come in?"
Right. Right.
But people do it by being stupid, and not thinking about it, not being aware of the threat is a challenge, isn't it?
Well, and a lot of security, common security measures are social contract, like locks. Locks can be broken. Locks can be picked. Just go look at the lock picking lawyer. He'll, luckily he makes his money from probably YouTube videos, and he doesn't, people who know that stuff don't need to use that skill. So computers, it's very much the same. When there's a will, there's a way, in general, unless you're talking crypto. And even then, there's tools. So
I talk to a lot of people about cybersecurity, and the first thing I try and tell them is think about how professional you are in what you do, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, whether you're a cybersecurity professional, whatever you do and you're professional with, they're doing the same. They're being as professional as a hacker to be able to ransomware you, or to fraudulently take funds from you, or steal your credit card information, or whatever their target is. They're being as professional as they can be. They have employee of the month. They have onboarding plans and training for employees, as it were, as hackers and things. They have targets, and KPIs. They run it.
They have shift work.
Shift working. It's run professionally.
So job wise, I was at Symantec for 20 years. So
that's a long time in one company these days.
Yeah, it really is. And, the high points, I think, the funny points, I ended up supporting Symantec antivirus for Lotus Notes. It rings a lot of bells for people.
It is still out there. Yeah. I worked for IBM, and we had the largest implementation of Lotus Notes. I think it was 45,000 users at the time. So it was a massive thing within IBM. I'm not sure what's changed. I've not been there for 20 odd years, so I'm sure it's changed now. But it was really big, and a lot of people loved it and how it worked. You could create workflows and things for sign-offs, for documents, and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think the equal or greater amount of people hated it, which is
Yes.
part of the reason why I gravitated towards that, because nobody knew how to do it. And when it came time to answer a customer's question, it's like, well, nobody knows. And when I talk to people who know, they start telling me, well, here's what a database is, and they didn't really know. Um, and another high point was so I through that notes job, I think I was level 2 support for notes. I attracted the attention of the public sector team, and so I was on the public sector team, service governments, government agencies, and things like that. I was on that team for 13, 14 years, and during that time, I pretty much took all of the things that other people were scared of or didn't want to do, or were a pain. And one of those things was the Symantec Security Information Manager, the SIM.
Yeah.
So it was the very early days of SIM, and now it's kind of a ubiquitous thing. Everyone uses them. It's a kind of an automatic checkbox that you have to have. And so I supported a pretty large implementation
Not
of.
as much in the UK. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many organisations don't have SIM products in place. Even though they are pretty straightforward nowadays to implement, and it's just watching the network and the network infrastructure, logging that data, and giving some alerts if it sees something. But it's
Yeah.
not as used as widely in the UK as it should be. Really, I think
Well,
I think NIST and a few things that happen with NIST and the government forcing people to down a particular route in the US has made people more secure because they have adopted those technologies because NIST suggested it would be a good thing. So I think
definitely.
it's happened more.
And the point products, as they used to be, are now more all-encompassing. So an
Yeah,
example is antivirus turned into, at least at Symantec, turned into antivirus and firewall, and then the antivirus, or it turned into EDR, right? And
yeah.
so an EDR product does things that a SIM does, a lot of things that you needed a SIM to do before. So it will correlate. It'll
Detect activity and do something about it, and then alert
yeah.
someone that there's something happening. That's the key thing a
Yeah.
SIM about, wasn't it?
Yeah, it'll see something on the network and see something on disk, and be able to associate the two together. And so, you don't necessarily need to have a SIM to do the things that are germane to defending a network.
That's similar with XDR nowadays as well. So
Exactly.
XDR is giving a lot of things that you're getting with the EDR side and the SIM all rolled in one, and you see a lot of people now starting to take XDR products as well.
Yep. Yep. So supporting that SIM made me kind of have a crash course into a lot of things, because for the customer I was supporting it for, they required certificates, and so it got me into the world of certificates for everything, and actually allowed me to take jobs during the course of my career at Symantec that were cybersecurity jobs, because
Yeah,
knowing about how events are handled, and how, correlating the events from different point products and into actionable tickets and things like that. I mean, it's a large part of what cybersecurity, what SOCs do still to this day.
yeah,
Um,
very true.
so I think after I kind of got burnt out on that public sector team, somewhere around the 15-year, 16-year mark at Symantec, I'm not sure when, I moved over to sales. And coming from a technical background, sales is always looked at it and, kind of sneered, like, oh, you're a sales guy, because,
As if it's a dirty word, isn't it? Sometimes. Yeah.
well, yeah, I mean, technical people often have to answer for the things that salespeople sell.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of the salespeople would see SEs as the bag carriers, and the
yes,
SEs would see the people who are keeping the salesman honest. Yeah, so it goes both ways, doesn't it?
in a lot of cases, and in a lot of cases, the salespeople don't know they're being dishonest. They're just trying to
Yeah.
sell, So yeah, I started in the inside SE team back at Symantec. They were called the SE Online Specialists, and so we took sales calls from everywhere, all different products. That was a really fun team. I keep in touch with all those folks still, and after a while there, I made my way to being the cybersecurity specialist. Was selling
Well,
the.
coming back to the SE role, though,
Uh-huh.
I see it's like the Rosetta Stone of technology, because you've got to be able to talk to a non-technical audience about a technical subject. So you've got to be able to do that translation between what the technology does into business speak, and because that's always a real challenge for the salespeople. They don't tend to be able to do that. They can do the business speak, but they can't do the technology speak. So you become that like translator, that Rosetta Stone of moving between what this thing can do technically and what it actually delivers from a business and perspective, isn't it?
Yes, all whilst not killing the deal, right?
Yeah,
Because as a and that's something I think I still struggle with to this day is the technical person inside me will be like, no, we can't do that. Sorry. A lot of times you have to work your way, from yes. I mean, you have to make it so that it's doable
yeah,
and feasible. And that's why sales, some SEs, the job is solution architect, is because you really have to come up with a way of doing the thing. So yeah, it's and being able to mix the technical with the non-technical, because when a salesperson gets the call to move to the stage of doing a demo, then the customer will typically invite their technical people to that demo,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
need
And
to
then
be
you're
able
back
to
talking
impress
technology
those.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So you need to be able to talk to the technical people, and and not leave a bad taste in their mouth, because customer is going to have a conversation after the call every time.
yeah,
Um,
definitely. So anyway,
so
you were saying you moved into this technical role. You were doing a lot more around sales, and it's a real cybersecurity type sale piece now. So how did that progress?
yeah, so that pretty much my last job before Symantec was rolled into Broadcom um, back in 2019. Uh, for actually a couple years before 2019, I was the field salesperson. So that meant I was, going and traveling to different customer sites and things like that, and selling the cybersecurity services for Symantec, which was pretty much a managed security service, and data feeds for intelligence, incident response, and something that brings me to my current job, a it was called the simulation platform.
Okay.
And so back
Was it
in
a true
2015,
cyber range simulation, or
it
was it
was.
just?
Yeah, it
It
was.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't called as much, but it was pretty much what we would consider cyber range. So back in 2015 or so, Symantec started doing internal cyber war games,
Yeah.
and I kind of shied away from it at first until my friend recruited me to a team, and I really had a lot of fun. I think it was the most fun I'd had probably back to my early days,
So
just
were
because
you blue teaming or red teaming?
it was gamified red teaming mostly.
Okay.
Um, so it was you had you had these challenges, and the tool that Symantec had bought, they bought a company called Blackfin Security, and so that company had a website called like it was the name is escaping me right now, but it was like the hacker manual or something like that, and it's going to come back to me after this
Yeah,
meeting,
but
and
you
I'm
can
going to
drop it
I
in the
didn't remember.
notes for the
Yeah,
as a comment later, can't you?
yeah, it's defunct now. I mean, I think Symantec shut down that website as soon as they bought the company, but that was just a huge amount of fun, and it got me doing the first red teaming activity I'd done probably since my very early days at the computer shop. Because being a defender all those years, it was kind of drummed into us that you don't do those things. Those are fireball offenses. You can't do hacker things. It's dangerous. And so looking on the other side of the coin and thinking in the mind of an attacker was just such a big paradigm shift for me. And it was so much fun. I started being more attuned to doing things like going to DEF CON and Black Hat. And so in the later stages of my career at Symantec, I piped up and volunteered to do things like be a booth babe at the different trade shows, and so I could go to DEF CON and go to all the talks and listen to the hackers and do all the fun security stuff.
I think it's really important, though, to be able to be a good defender. You need to know how an attacker approaches it. So actually experience it, and being an attacker, you learn a lot more about how to defend against it, don't you?
You really do. You really do. And I think, all of the different domains, like you can't know everything. But I think getting in the psychology part and thinking about why someone would attack or where they would first start to attack, what is the weakest point? I mean, still, the weakest point is the people. And I think the easiest way is, with some of the recent high profile hacks, the easiest way is social engineering, sadly. Getting the weakest link.
With social engineering, it's actually using things to get information that you want. So it could be standing outside where all the smokers stand at a building and having a chat and things, and picking up information, asking questions. It could be putting a quiz on Facebook. I don't even see. I see them all the time. What's your first school you went to? What was the street you lived on? What's your first car? What was your first record?
And all your friends are responding with their password list.
They're looking at what you all the words phrases.
Yeah, the security question.
Password reset.
Yes. What street did you grow up on?
People just don't think what they're doing. What's your dog's name, and and all these other things. They're just looking for ways to social engineer your details, your credentials, aren't they? So
and actually, I think the real crux of that is people in general don't want to make a fuss. They don't want to upset anyone. So when you put them on the spot, they're going to try and not ruffle your feathers. They're going to try and give you what you want in general, unless they have their guard up. And so that's how social engineers really work. Is they're just trying to do this one thing. I'm just trying to get the Wi-Fi working. What's the password here? I don't know what's wrong. So that's if anyone listening to this has a chance to go to DEF CON, check out the villages. The social engineering villages. Amazing and scary, as are a lot of the others. So I think back to
why did you move from Symantec to SimSpace then? Was it it came to a time for you to make a decision to move? Were you approached by SimSpace? Why was that change?
So Symantec was acquired by Broadcom, and so they went through a huge layoff period, and I think they were putting the cybersecurity services on the chopping block to sell it off to another company. And so I was laid off. And I, of course, had my severance, and I was like, I'm going to take a couple months off. And sure enough, pandemic hit. So the pandemic made it very difficult to get a traveling salesperson. And I think a lot
was traveling with it, so it's difficult to get a traveling sales job.
Yeah, it's very difficult to get any job, actually. So I took a step down and worked, got a job over at Sentinel One. Not a step down company wise; it's a great company. but I worked at Sentinel-1 as a technical account manager. So I went a couple steps back in my career to something I knew, had solid. And so I was there a year, and until my friend who had taken a job as the very first SE at SimSpace pinged me, and since I had back when I worked at Symantec, I had turned him on to the simulation platform. I'd given him a couple of demo licenses, and so he had me apply at SimSpace, and I became the second SE, the first non-managerial SE at SimSpace about a little over a year ago. Actually, it was a year ago, October 22nd, 2021 was when I started at SimSpace.
I find SimSpace really interesting because of my background. So, because for most people who know me, I'm an ex-flight simulation engineer from the Royal Air Force. So, in a sim, what we would do is put people into it. So, a crew, 1 man, 2 man, 4 man, depending on the aircraft, we put them in a sim, and we would put them through an evaluation through a mission. So that mission could be, fly here, there, and there and back, bomb this place, do that, depending on the type of aircraft. But it's an immense immersive environment. So they don't know the difference between being in the sim as being in the real aircraft. But then what we would do is change the scope of the mission to see how it affected them, create issues with the aircraft potentially. We'd introduce different things to test the people, the process, and the technology, and that's what I see SimSpace is about, and the cyber range. So what we're doing now is, creating that environment for a SOC team, put them into it, so they've got all the same tools and everything, and they're actually going then to be evaluated in a way that you can objectively evaluate them. Because that's the other thing is, without a flight sim, you can't objectively evaluate a flight crew. If you put them in the real aircraft, there's no way you can do it at distance. You can't
account for all the variables.
You can't keep track of it. But in a sim, you can evaluate, because you've got all the information to make those decisions and be objective in that evaluation process. And I would assume with SimSpace, that's one of the critical differences between what people have been doing in the past, where they may be duplicating an environment and using that for attacks and things. So it's not simulated, it's a real environment, whether it's virtual or physical. They're doing that. So, tell us more about what you constitute SimSpace being, and a cyber rain, and where you think it's, giving more capabilities for an organization, say.
Yeah, so SimSpace and cyber ranges in general, the concept is pretty simple. It's a bunch of virtual machines set up in such a way where you can do bad things, you can destroy the environment, and then spin it up again quickly if you need to. Yeah. But on top of that, there are all sorts of different variables and factors, that might be easy to do for one person. Set up a lab environment for them that you just spin up a couple of VMs. But when you're talking to an entire Windows domain, Exchange server, workstations, DMZ, and then the internet, because you don't want to have your static cyber range open to the random variable of the actual internet. And so you have to create all of that inside of a bubble, right? And so what SimSpace does is we have all of these tools to where you can, as a user or an event manager in SimSpace, you can kind of create your own world, and it can have all of the parts I talked about, or you can have even more. So
Minecraft for cybersecurity.
Yeah, don't get me started on Minecraft. Yeah, love that. And simulators. Oh, I love them too. Kerbal Space Program. I don't know if you played it, but if you haven't, you should.
I'm more of the new version of Flight Sim, which is
Yeah,
2020, I think. We use that
amazing.
Explain a lot as well. So Explain's
Yeah,
really good. Yeah, because it's quite sophisticated what you can do with it, and you've got sim operators. Operations section, so you can actually have on a tablet or another machine and actually run the sim
yeah,
from a distance
yeah.
or back to the room or something, which is better than just the simulation bit on its own.
And so I'm not an astronaut, and I didn't go to school to do astronaut things. But based on me playing that game, Kerbal Space Program, I learned some fundamental things about how things work in space, how orbits work. And so that's the idea with a cyber range is by, you can have a fresh cybersecurity person out of school or what have you, and they don't have any experience in the actual real world. And so you want to give people their first couple free guys, if you will, doing things in cybersecurity. They need to be able to fail. And so that's another part about any sim is you learn a lot by crashing. You learn a lot by how the failure happens. And so
learn from doing it wrong, and so that you don't do it
it could
for real.
be, yeah, it could be you could be, a prodigy and do everything right, but you're not talking with your team. And so while you were over here in your corner doing everything right, your team was failing, or you were failing your team in some way because you didn't tell them about a thing that was happening. So there's that people, process, technology. You can test all of them or one of them, and so SimSpace offers a place where the range, it can be, I love using this word now because I learned what it actually means to have bespoken for things. But you can have a bespoke range that you can have all the things that your business has, be it ATMs or operational technology where you're running a factory. You can have all those in the range and make it so you could fail and blow the entire place up. And then within about 5 minutes, you can have that entire thing stood up again. All of the special configurations, because I've been a lab monkey. I've been told to go wrestle an entire lab of, even if they're VMs, you have to go upgrade something or you have to go do something on all of those systems. You're pretty much having to remote into or script or use some orchestration SOAR to go to each of those systems and do something. And so we make it easy to do those things with SimSpace. We also offer training. So
you've wasted so much time, resetting everything. You're not getting the benefit of the range out of it unless you can do that quick reset. Boom, back to where we started. Everything ready to go. Let's start again.
Exactly. Known good. Here we are back at the start or the mid. You can take a clone at any point. So you can say, okay, we're about to throw this inject. Things are about to get weird. Let's clone everything, and to kind of take a snapshot.
Okay. So what are the kind of things you've been doing with customers with SimSpace? Yeah, we won't talk about particular customers because we don't have that validated. But what are the kind of things that you've done? Say, early days when you're in the US, and what you've been doing recently in the UK, part of the working with the UK team.
Well, one of the things that we do for prospective customers is we offer a live fire exercise. So it is it's an event that takes 3 or 4 hours, and we take a blue team or a blue and a red team, or sometimes a red team, through a run in our range, and we create a couple of objectives for activities that they need to do, things they need to see. And one thing that we can do in SimSpace that I haven't mentioned, which I totally failed, we can run automated attacks. So we can choose from a catalog of attacks that are inspired by real world threat actors, ATP-N or APT. Wow.
Yeah.
Too many acronyms. and launch that at a time or on demand. And so you can create objectives that kind of test people's ability to find that that's happened or find that that's happening, and what they would go through to try and stop it, or to try and even just see all of the things that are happening because of that, right? So during that 3 or 4 hour event, we run a couple of attacks. We could even run them before the event and just have people kind of go Easter egg hunting, for flags that are in the environment. And then we take a standard set of tools and have the customer use those tools to find IOCs, and then report. We have a ticketing system built into the platform where they go lodge tickets based on what they're seeing. And at the very end of the event, we kind of go through some assessment activities where we look at what attacks, what the defender actions were, and we deliver a small report on how things went. And this is all run by us sales engineers. What it is a far cry from, and I really selling our company short by even talking about that version of the live fire exercise, because the actual product is our professional services team running those events. And so our actual customers, after they buy a live fire event or after they buy a range, our professional services team they have actual red teamers, actual blue teamers who have been in those scenarios live, against the real threats. I'm just a guy who's worked in the industry for a long time, who can talk the talk.
Same here. Yeah, I can't say I've ever
Right.
been on a real red team or a real blue team, and
I've been on the periphery. I've been on the periphery,
but not actually in that space. So these
exactly.
guys are very professional in what they do. I believe there's some from some of the great government bodies like NSA, US Cyber Command, people within that team as well. So they've experienced some real things. I'm just looking at time. I'm a bit conscious. We've got about 4 minutes left, so we need to cut it short at this point. But it's been great. I didn't realise we'd been talking for an hour, and that's always a testament to the conversation, isn't it? If you don't realise you've been talking for an hour, it's been a good conversation. But just coming on to what we're talking about with SimSpace and the use of it for training, for evaluation, and the range use itself. So you and I are going to put some live streams together on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. I think the first one we're talking about 16th of November, and it'll follow for 3 weeks. So if you're interested in knowing a lot more about SimSpace and what a range it is, how you can configure it, how you can use it for a live fire, and how you could have a persistent range if you needed to do a lot more activity with your team, if you've got large teams or teams that are across multiple geographies. Again, we can show that. We're going to do 20 minutes at a time over the next 3 weeks. Well, 4 weeks it'll be, but the first one will be a week next Wednesday, or 2 weeks tomorrow. So it won't be next week, it'll be the following week on the 16th of November at 2 p.m. GMT. It'll be recorded, so if you're outside that time zone, you can watch it as well. But the other thing we talked about before we started, I always ask 2 questions before we finish. So the 2 questions are: what's the best meal you ever had? What was it? Where was it? But why was it the best meal? So hopefully we've got a good answer for that.
Yeah. I actually had to look up the photo that I just took. It was a couple months ago, and it was at the SimSpace SE offsite in Savannah, Georgia. It was at a restaurant called Husk, and we kind of got a little bit of everything. And so I just remember having the best oysters I've ever had. And they also had this caviar. I'm not a caviar person. But I like to try everything, right? And they had this caviar.
Try anything and not eat it again the next time. I didn't like it.
But it was raised at a local university where they're doing this breeding program for Russian sturgeon. And so they had this what would normally be you can't get it caviar that came, as a byproduct of the university program. So that's the best meal I had.
So
I've
the other
had so
question
far.
is, what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Most adventurous thing
And don't say it was
recently
eating
comes to mind.
caviar from sturgeon in South Georgia.
Well, sometime around the pandemic,
Yeah.
I reconnected with a friend that I hadn't hung out with since high school, and he got really into bicycling in various forms, and he was really into BMX riding, and so I got myself a BMX, and which is like a dirt bike. And my friend convinced me to start riding the skate bowls. And so that's probably the most adventurous thing. I'm 45 now. Maybe not the smartest move, but
Did you injure yourself in any way, shape, or form?
I did. I think I took a couple ribs out falling. Yeah.
Definitely adventurous. So,
Yes.
but thanks ever so much for joining. It's 3 o'clock, so we'll have to
Thanks for
close
having me.
the stream down. If you can stay on afterwards, and we'll just have a quick catch up with things. But for
Sure.
everybody else, thank you very much. I'll just put up details for Jesse. So it's Jesse9 of SimSpace. If you want to connect with him on LinkedIn, though, we've got Jesse9 at LinkedIn, our simple one. And if you want to look at what SimSpace are doing, you can look at the website, www.simspace.com. And also, if you want to contact Jesse directly, jesse.9@simspace.com. But please join us. In 2 weeks' time, I'll promote it through LinkedIn again, and we'll be talking through the different aspects of what SimSpace can do for you around training, evaluation of new staff, evaluation of your a real SOC team or blue team, part of an LFE, and also a persistent cyber range. We're going to do it in 3 20-minute sections over 3 weeks, covering that off. So thanks ever so much, everyone. Hopefully see you soon, but thank you for joining us today.